Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on corporate social responsibility and COVID-19. Our program today is coming to you with a special guest, Matt McLelland, Innovation Strategist for Covenant Transport Services. It's exciting to have Matt with us, a very well-known innovation strategist in the region and actually nationally, to share his perspective about COVID-19, corporate social responsibility and its implications for innovation. Throughout today's program, if you have comments, please use the chat bar. If you want to pose a question later in our program with a Q&A, please do that as well. My name is Jenny Whitener, CEO of Bridge Innovate, and I'll be serving as our facilitator today. Bridge Innovate is a global network of business strategists, consultants, and designers. We team up with you to spark courageous design, inspiring leadership, and agile change to transform your organization for both growth and good. It's our goal with our Inspire series to share valuable insights from leaders around the world to support you in your innovation journey. And we're thrilled today to welcome Matt McLelland. So Matt, I'll hand it off to you.
All right, thanks, Jenny. Let me share my screen here for just a second. Colin, if you could give me, all right, can everybody see it? Can everybody see the first screen? Oh, hold on a second. There we go. Can everybody see the first screen?
There we are.
All right. There's Alex and everyone else. All right. So today I want to give a very general presentation on corporate social responsibility and then tie some of those concepts back to the current COVID-19 pandemic. I'm going to assume most of you are familiar with corporate social responsibility. And I want to spend the first part of our time together this morning breaking it down a little bit, because it's a term like innovation disruption that I think is kind of complicated and gets very overused. To give it a little context, a little bit my role at Covenant Transportation. For those of you who maybe aren't from Chattanooga, we're a publicly traded logistics company with emphasis on long-haul trucking. So we're based here in Chattanooga. I'm the innovation strategist, which means I get to spend a lot of time thinking about the future of our industry and how we plan for the future. In this graphic, you'll see continuous improvement and disruption. And where I spend most of my time is in the middle, in innovation. It's fascinating work, but enough about me, because we're here to talk about corporate social responsibility. And for the duration of this, I'm just going to say CSR, since corporate social responsibility can tend to be a little bit of a mouthful. So I want to start like this. In October of last year, a prospective customer asked Covenant to explain our sustainability initiatives. So internally, we talked a little bit about how to respond to that, as I felt like, you know, they needed to know a little bit more than just a few sentences about our solar array, our investments to improve our fleet's mile per gallon, you know, our recycling efforts. And so as we started to compose our response, we quickly realized that sustainability was really only part of a bigger story that needed to be told. What they really wanted to know, and what my sales team and our executives thought about, was that they wanted to understand our overall position on CSR. So this is getting a lot of attention right now, especially in a time where the COVID-19 crisis is forcing companies to think really beyond products that they make and people that they employ. So I want to break all this into four things: CSR and what it means, why this is important to any company, regardless of vertical market, what the components of CSR mean, and of course, why this is important right now during a time of crisis. So let's start with the first part. What is CSR? So there are a lot of ways to answer this, but generally people think of it as a self-regulating business model that helps a company be more socially accountable, not just to itself, but to its stakeholders, the public, and of course, to customers. This slide shows a little bit of the breakdown of some of the more common pillars in an overall CSR plan. And Alex, you and I have talked about this before. There's no single right way to build a plan. Different vertical markets focus on different things. So for example, and Doug Smith, you and I have talked about this before, you know, we burn millions of gallons of diesel fuel every year as a trucking company. And so obviously the sustainability part would be a big part of a CSR plan for Covenant. So that's just a little bit about the major pillars. My second point is about why it matters. So it's my belief today that in 2020, the average company really wants to do the right thing, not just because it's a marketing tool to get more business, but companies, I'm finding, are genuinely interested in creating work environments where employees want to feel as their contributions are actually having an impact. I know this is very true for the company that I work for. The leadership and the primary shareholders of Covenant are deeply concerned about the welfare of our employees, even if it means walking away from certain types of business. One thing I have found, which is also pointed out on this slide, is that customers are willing to spend more with companies whose brands care about some of the things that they care about. One thing I've also found is that CSR matters because it creates trust among employees and customers. It provides a positive workspace that unites and inspires employees. It's helpful for local communities, you know, as they think about the working in a city where they live and the types of investments that those companies are making in that community. But overall, why CSR matters, I can tell you that in the last 6 months, we have had more prospective customers ask us to talk about our CSR initiatives, our sustainability initiatives, really than at any point in the past. And so now more than ever, I think it's becoming important. And if you don't already have some CSR guidelines in place as a company, it's definitely something you need to look into. So my third point, what are the components of CSR? Now, given the short time we have today, I'm just going to really talk about this as we have been discussing it at Covenant. I'm on a committee where we're talking about how to build our plan. And some of these pillars that you see here are some of the things that we're focusing on. And so I'll go a little bit into each one of those. Sustainability is the biggest part of CSR. It's what most of our customers are interested in knowing about. Again, we work for a logistics company that consumes a tremendous amount of diesel fuel, and they want to know what type of investments we're making to help our earth be a little bit more green. So sustainability is a big part of most CSR plans. Then we have diversity, and this is the idea that diversity encompasses acceptance and respect. It's understanding that each person is individual, and we're often better when we recognize individual differences of each of us. So this is another major part of a CSR plan. And then there's the corporate code of ethics. And in our case, there are Covenant Transport's guiding principles. This slide sort of demonstrates what our core principles are. It's just a part of who we are. So that's another one of the pillars that we're focusing on our CSR plan. And then finally, corporate philanthropy. This is how employees give back both their time and money. So these are the four things that we're looking at Covenant as part of our overall CSR plan. So I've spent just a couple of minutes explaining what this is. And right now I want to kind of transition into what does this mean in the world that we're in right now, this global pandemic where the economy is essentially shut down. As I started looking into how corporations respond in times of a crisis, this book, it's on my left, I don't know if it's on your left or right, but it's on my left, keeps showing up as it presents a number of different cases for how companies respond to challenges during difficult times, especially economic challenges, global financial instability, not so much pandemics, because I don't think when they wrote this book, they really were thinking about that. But what it does is it doesn't provide a roadmap for how to react, but it just gives, it basically describes companies thinking through CSR and how they would go about making really tough decisions during difficult times. So to personify that a little bit, I wanted to show this letter that I got from Chipotle, which is like my favorite burrito place other than my local Mojo Burrito, about how their CEO chose to get on the front end of this. This actually came out in early March, and it shows what they're doing for their employees during this time. So having researched Chipotle in the past, I know this course of action wasn't just a quick sporadic decision. This is part of an overall strategy that they had been thinking about long before this happened, about how they would react in a time of crisis. It's not just a gimmick to get customers or to show the rest of us what a great company they are. They really mean this. They really care about their employees, which is exactly why I plan to spend money with them as soon as this is over and I can go back to eating fast food burritos. We're also seeing examples of corporate altruism during this crisis. And, you know, while some responses to decisions are quick, unplanned decisions that, you know, any executive makes, they're the normal course of business, many many of these corporate decisions that we're seeing today were guided by pre-existing CSR plans that executives and stakeholders had thought about well in advance. And so while you can't always anticipate the different types of scenarios we're experiencing today, you can make fundamental decisions about who you are as a company, fundamental questions about, I don't know, things like your culture, how you value your employees, a general code of ethics that you want to plan to follow during a crisis. And so on the other side of the screen, I've included a couple of press releases, one from a software company called Project 44 that we actually do some business with. And I happen to know their founder very well. And he and I were ironically traveling internationally literally days before the COVID-19 crisis exploded. And as they started to restrict travel back in the United States, we would stay up at night trying to figure out, how are we creatively going to get back to the United States if they block travel? What are we going to do? And in that discussion, we started talking about how his company was going to respond. And it was funny because he didn't really have to think that much about it, because as the founder of the company, his executive team and investors had already thought through some of the concessions and things that they were going to do as it related to making their product available for free to certain types of customers doing relief work in a time of crisis. And it really has a lot to do with the way their company is structured and what they do for a living. But it's just interesting how it wasn't hard for him to write this press release, because he kind of already knew what he was going to do. I think the same is probably true for the CEO of Zoom, who, as most of you know, is giving his product away to K through 12 schools for the duration of this crisis. One thing I also wanted to point out is that from what I've read, and I spend a lot of my time reading everything from the Wall Street Journal to the New York Times, I listen to NPR and I watch the news, but most of the corporate responses that we're seeing right now really have less to do with what the administration is forcing them to do, and more to do with just them stepping up and doing things for the right reason. In fact, with the exception of maybe General Motors, I think every positive story, and you'll see a couple of more here in subsequent slides, are doing what they're doing because it's part of who they are. It's part of a corporate social responsibility plan. And it's just part of, like I said, it's just part of who they are. And you don't have to look very far to see well-known consumer brands stepping up to provide support to those on the front lines of the pandemic. And it's more than just donating free stuff and executives cutting salaries. It's gestures like, the reallocation of capital and other forms of corporate volunteerism from normal recipients and diverting those resources to people working directly with COVID. For example, locally, I know of a company that does a lot of volunteer work at the Tennessee Aquarium. They're re-diverting those volunteer efforts to doing relief work for people at Erlanger Hospital. I think people are starting to ask questions of, what kind of things is my organization uniquely positioned to solve? A great example of that is just yesterday here in Chattanooga, Southern Champion Tray, who makes paper boxes, they decided, hey, let's come up with a CDC approved face mask. And guess what? In almost 2 days, they were able to do that. And now they're giving away 100,000 masks that they're building. It was an answer to what are we uniquely positioned to solve. I think other questions that leaders are asking is, do the products and talents and services of their companies, how does that lend to the engagement right now? These are all questions that I think executives are asking of how to pitch in just because they want to do the right thing. This is an example. Abbott Labs is testing this. In fact, this just goes live tomorrow. Drive-through testing, a partnership with Walgreens to do testing in parking lots with results coming out in 15 minutes. Then, of course, you have Dyson, which I think we all know makes vacuum cleaners, but has pivoted to make ventilator machines. So that's pretty exciting. And then I mentioned Southern Champion Tray, but then Chattanooga Whiskey here in Chattanooga is making hand sanitizer. Of course, they sold out. Alex, what was that, like in 20 minutes of all the hand sanitizer? In fact, I know the founder of the company. I sent him a text, asked him if he had a little stash on the side. He's like, nope, it's all sold out. It's all gone. So just in closing, and again, Jenny and I want to wrap this, open this up a little bit and have people submit some questions. But just a quick story. A month ago, I was working with our team to submit a corporate social responsibility application that a prospective customer was requiring us to complete using this platform called EcoVadis. It's an international company. It's an online tool that major 500, Fortune 500 companies use to rank all new prospective vendors, regardless of the vertical market. So it sort of provides an apples to apples comparison about how we rank against each other. In our case, carriers rank against each other because the company was going to use that as a way to potentially evaluate who wins the business. So we not only had to answer questions about our sustainability initiatives, our corporate ethics, our diversity, we had to answer questions about sustainable procurement, but we actually had to prove that our answers were right by attaching supporting documentation from employee handbooks, from our corporate 10K statements, things off our corporate website, press releases, and basically anything else that validated that we were who we said we are, that we were doing the types of things that we said we were doing. So, you know, it was a challenging process, and we learned a lot from it. We've actually decided to work on some improvement areas as a result of that process. And if I were to leave you with one thing today, it's this. If your company hasn't gone through a formal CSR discovery process, because something like what we're experiencing right now with this pandemic is going to happen again at some point, unfortunately, I can assure you that at some point in the future, you will need to refer back to it. And it's going to take time. It's going to take executive involvement. It's going to take some of you a deep dive into every nook and cranny of your company as you begin to inventory all of your current initiatives. And if you're like us, you'll be surprised to find that even if you don't have a formal plan in place, you're actually doing more than you're giving yourself credit for. So, you know, Jenny, that's really all I had in the 20 minutes. Let's see. Yeah, in the 20 minutes that I promised you I'd stick to. I know that you were going to do a poll. I think we wanted to maybe even take some questions from the audience, maybe. Well, I know one person it worked for, because I can see John Zeiser, the president of Southern Champion Trade, is online here. Their company certainly pivoted pretty quickly. Great job, John, by the way.
I was going to say, John, and if you want to unmute and give us some inspiration about how you guys managed to make that shift so quickly.
Oh, John's a very humble guy. He may not speak up publicly, but John, great work.
Well, thanks. I was
was
staying off eating lunch. So, that was really a team effort here that one of our designers was just thinking, what could we do? And he had that thought. Actually, our whole industry, I think, had the same idea about the same time. So there are multiple paperboard packaging people across the country doing the same thing, and they created a website, popped it up, where people can go on and find out where these things are available. So it's not something that I see has a long-term life to it, but I think we have the technology now, and anytime it's needed in the future, we'll be able to pop it back up again quickly.
Amazing. Congratulations, John, to you and your team. I mean, what an amazing response. One of the things I find very interesting is how quickly teams were able to surface ideas and to shift and make that happen. I mean, what's the secret to that kind of very rapid response? Did you see anything particular happening there at Southern Champion Trade that made it happen so quickly?
Yeah, I think, for us right now, business is off probably 60%. So we had, and everyone working from home for the most part, other than the manufacturing floor. And I think it was just a matter of people having time and thinking, what can we do? But they were able to innovate quickly, try some things out. And I think what really helped was our designer spending some time talking to local physicians. I think we all saw locally here some physicians that created a new surgical gown that was very clever, very innovative. And our designer called them and said, hey, what do you think about this? They came over quickly, helped us improve the design a bit. They wanted to make sure it wouldn't interfere with the face mask, things like that. And they wanted a wider field of view. And again, that whole iteration process, probably 48 hours. And so from the middle of last week we produced our first batch yesterday, and we're putting those out for testing today. And then we will make any tweaks and then make some larger runs from there.
That's amazing.
You know,
Again,
Jenny, one thing that we're doing, and, you know, Doug Smith's on the call and he can probably perk up and say a few things about it, but Covenant was able to deliver, Doug, what is it, two entire loads of N95 masks to some of the New York area hospitals. And, you know, it was a little risky to ask our drivers to drive into not just a hot spot, but a like crazy, super turbocharged hot spot. And the first guy we asked just jumped right in and did it without even thinking twice. I'm not sure I would want to be in New York City right now, but they did it. And so we were proud to play a role in the delivery of that.
Yeah, we had drivers that went out for, you know, we had a load of, there's a series of probably a dozen or so trucks that were lined up in California that were delivering masks out to Arkansas. So there was a caravan of sorts. And then we did have 2 weeks ago, one of those first, it was one of the first press conferences that Vice President Pence had put out there about masks were being delivered. You know, we had two of our trucks that were part of that. So it was something that we were honored and blessed to be a part of, and we're excited. And we've got drivers, our professional drivers are going in to all of these hotspots, whether it's in New York or Louisiana, California, and they're going, and they're just wanting to do their part, and that's the exciting thing about it.
great. Are there others that would like to share? Congratulations, Doug and Covenant. Are there others that would like to share anything about what your organization is doing in the response on corporate social responsibility during COVID? Feel free to use the chat or to pop in and unmute yourself and share with your perspective. Some of the things I've heard today that's been just extraordinary is that especially this relationship between the amazing shift that's happened in corporate social responsibility. Many of you who did get a chance to participate in the poll that we just presented said 100% of you that responded to the poll said our corporate social responsibility will be significantly different. The way we approach that now will be significantly different going forward. It has been an extraordinarily traumatic and sad crisis that we're in the middle of. But if there's this good lining that comes out of this about how we mobilize in the corporate and business sector, corporately on the social responsibility side, that could be extraordinary, that we've really built muscle around that. We built innovation. We built a lot of corporate heart, the passion, the commitment that has mobilized very quickly. Just hearing the stories just from Covenant, you guys sharing, and Southern Champion Trade, how quickly your teams responded has been amazing.
Yeah, Jenny, I'll jump in and answer Mark's question. I haven't talked to Mark in 20 years, so I'm glad you joined in, Mark. So yeah, absolutely. You know, he asked if creating a strong CSR strategy requires core leadership team and the way they see their purpose at a higher and deeper level. You know, it's funny, as we started talking about it internally, corporate leadership at the very top is where it all starts. And I know that sounds a little trite. And, you know, at our company from the day one, from 1986 when we were founded, David Parker, his wife Jacqueline, and some of the other core members of who were around in the very beginning, they defined a lot of the culture questions and just kind of doing the right thing. Nobody thought about pandemics, nobody thought about financial crises, but they thought about all this stuff during startup mode when they had trouble making payroll and buying trucks. And it has continued to be a core foundation of who the company was moving, you know, ever since that first day. In fact, I think the guiding principles that we have today are some of the very ones that we had way back in the beginning. And again, it just takes that corporate leadership from the very beginning, you know, to make that call. It can't really come from communications department or from the sales department. It's got to come from the top leadership and just kind of get communicated down. You know, for us, we have a lot of these things on posters on the walls or all around the building. Just to remind all of us about that piece of our overall CSR plan. I don't think we called it a CSR plan back then. It was just kind of part of who we were as a culture, which, you know, again, I'll just kind of end by saying, I think that most companies, Jenny, I think you and I looked this up yesterday. It said of the S&P 500, like 80% or 65% already had CSR plans. Literally, you get your people in a room for a day, you can figure this out, publish it on your website, make it a part of who you are, make it a part of your sales process, and you'll be in a much better position.
All right. I agree with you, Matt. I think it's amazing. It is a strong opportunity to follow, for all of us to follow the leaders that have jumped so quickly to provide these great services to our communities through their assets. One of the other things that I found surprising about this shift in corporate responsibility through COVID has just been the amazing innovation that's come to life so quickly. So many times I think we hear from corporations that it's difficult to jumpstart or to mobilize quickly, prototypes or to shift assets and to innovate into the new. But when there's been an opportunity, a crisis like this, it's fueled people to be free of kind of some bureaucracies, to forge an idea, bring it right to the top, get some momentum and resources around it. And I even love the story that John was sharing at Southern Champion Trail, where you went out and got inspiration for the medical community. How do we get inspiration? How do we empower teams to move quickly and innovate? So I love that about what's been an outcome of this movement. I love the heart and the brand development that's happened. And I love the impact that these organizations and our businesses are having in our communities, and just applaud everyone. It's exciting. You give me courage and you give me great momentum, and I hope it does for everyone else. Any other questions from our group today before we wrap up?
Alex asked about B Corps. Alex, I had a slide in there about B Corps. It got a little weedy, and so we took it out because you could talk for an hour about B corporations. But benefit corps, and it's one thing to have a CSR plan. It's another thing to have, your core values printed on the wall on posters in your office. But it's a whole nother thing to go through benefit corporation certification and actually have that written into your corporate charter. You don't necessarily get tax breaks from it, but you do have to provide a lot of transparency to the outside world that you're doing a lot of these things that you're committed to. All goes back to brand building, people wanting to do business with companies that they identify with. It's pretty cool stuff. I wish I did have time to talk about it.
Great. Any other questions? We'll move on. So as we wrap up today's program, I want to say a special thanks to Matt McLelland, Innovation Strategist at Covenant Transport, and all of you who joined and shared your story. It's quite inspiring. Thank you, and we'll look for more inspiration from you as we go. As a part of our Inspire series, there are more events coming, and we have a number of programs that we're offering at Bridge Innovate to help us identify future trends, patterns, and disruptions. One is Foresight Scouts. It launched on June 15th, and it is an online cohort experience, so you can do it right from the lake house or from your home office. And it will be a group of individuals that come together to search for these other patterns and trends to identify disruptions. Mary Kim's a program leader on that. You can reach out to Mary at bridgeinnovate.com or to me. We're happy to share that with you. You can find out about this and all of our other inspirational webinars coming up in our series at bridgeinnovate.com under our events tab. So thank you so much for joining today. There'll be a recording of today's session sent out afterwards. And we wish you all a wonderful day and weekend ahead. Bye now.